Actually, Seymour's story is like every family story. It started way back. So what we can do is try to take a section of somebody's life, since life goes on through other generations, and see if we can learn about the person from what records we have. Seymour's grandfather's name was Archibald Prater, and Archibald and his wife Susanna moved from Lawrence County, South Carolina to Coosa County, Alabama in the mid-1830s after the Indians were moved out. And in 1860, of course he was an older man, his wife Susanna, in 1860 the two older children, Sophia and George, had married, and they only had Lewis and Emily at home. So Lewis at this time, who was Seymour's dad, was about 13 years old in 1860. Lewis joined the Company B of the 34th Alabama Infantry. This was actually an ambrotype picture. Does anybody know what an ambrotype is? It's a stained glass picture. My Aunt Mary Lou had this picture, and when I was little, it came in a case. She let me play with it one day, and I took the glass out of the case, and you could look through it. It's just stained. It didn't become a picture until you put it in the case. You can see his pay voucher. This particular company fought in the Battle of Missionary Ridge, Chattanooga, and Lewis was captured on November the 23rd of 1863. He was moved first to Nashville, then to Louisville, Kentucky. Eventually he was in prison, at Rock Island Prison in Rock Island, Illinois. The Rock Island Prison had about 1,500 Confederate prisoners. Of those 1,500, only 500 survived. Lewis survived. In 1870, Lewis's family was still in Coosa County, Alabama. Then in 1880, the family had moved to Monroe County, Mississippi. And if you look on the census sheet, there's Martha, the wife. There's no Lewis. So we assume he died somewhere between 1870 and 1880. This is John Seymour's younger brother and all of his family. And they had a large family. And actually, John's great-grandson's here today. So Seymour grew up in Monroe County in the 1880s. From that census record, you can kind of see they owned property in Alabama, but when they came to Mississippi, they didn't really have any property. Something happened in that time where they kind of had changing financial times. They recovered though, and in the 1880s moved to Pontotoc, where Granddaddy Seymore bought a farm. And in the late 1880s, early 1890s, Seymour started farming. During this time, he had his first marriage. He married a lady named Willow Wright. They had two children, Orrin Arthur and Curtis Noonan. Somewhere in the mid-1890s, Seymour and his wife divorced, and his wife took the two boys and moved to Shreveport. And Seymour remarried. His new wife was Rachel Roy, and by 1900 they had two children, Herman and Roy. Seymour's house was south of Pontotoc in Woodland. Typical kind of house for that time. Apparently kind of had a dog trot in the center. Seymore was a farmer, and he had a grist mill. Is anybody familiar with grist mills? There's a rock in here. You put the corn, there's a belt that pulls it, it grinds it, and then the corn meal comes out here. And apparently Granddaddy ground corn on Saturdays. It was not a daily kind of meal. This is Uncle Herman when he was older. You can't really see it, but in that, in the original picture, there was a little boy here. We weren't really sure who that was. This is a neighbor boy who bought the who bought the corn to grind. Seymour's family after Herman and Roy. This is Herman Roy, and this is Curtis Noonan, and that's my dad, Eugene. It's probably in the 1930s. They actually had some girls in their family too. I don't really have any really good pictures of them. There was 4 daughters, Mary Lou, Eddie B, WC's mother, and then Jessie and Bessie, who were 2 younger twins. So Seymour had a lot of kids. My father and mother married and lived with Granddad and Grandmother for a couple of years, and then they moved to Granddad's place on the house, and later bought their own farm. But my mother lived, this is when they were living with Grandmother. That's Rachel, and that's my mother. So that's kind of the genealogy part of the talk. So that's kind of where Seymore came from, his life. The next part of what I'm going to talk about is kind of about Seymore himself and kind of my impression of what he did. First of all, I kind of want to go over my thoughts on what a story is. When I was young and made up a series of events that served my own purpose, my mother would ask me, "Are you telling a story?" Has anybody's mother ever asked them that? I thought so. What she usually meant was, "Are you lying?" But our society is based on stories, which are no longer called lies. They're called fiction. There's been a lot of money made on fiction. Walt Disney, Universal, Paramount, MGM, United Artists, all fiction, or mostly. NBC, CBS, 78 cable channels, 150 satellite channels, mostly stories. Famous authors John Grisham, William Faulkner, a lot of stories. Even the way our society works, the scientific method in medicine involves making a hypothesis which is based on imagination and what could or could not happen. It envisions what's not known. It's a story. So all stories and imagination involve fiction or lies, as my mother would feel like. And we have to decide what's truth and what is fiction in life. And sometimes that's hard. I want to talk a little bit about Borden Deal. Borden Deal is a Pontotoc and Union County author. He graduated from Macedonia High School, and he had a good many successful books. He lived on Seymour's farm for a time in the 1940s. And one of his books, the name of the book was Dragon's Wine, featured a fictitious allegorical figure by the name of Seymore Prater. All of Deal's novels are in the Union County Library if you want to read them. Most of them are out of print. And if you ask my mother, my daddy, what Borden Deal was doing on the farm, they didn't really know. He kind of sat around, they all worked. Granddaddy didn't make him work, and they couldn't really figure out what he was doing there. I mean, apparently he just lived there and was kind of an oddball, you know. He'd sit around, Daddy would say, you know, we go work, he'd sit on the steps, you know, he never did anything. And, so about 20 years later, he came out with a book. And it's interesting, Borden Deal, if you read the book, he had another life as a writer too. And he kind of had two different ways of writing, but he had quotes about how he described Granddaddy in the book. Yesterday and tomorrow were today to Seymore Prater. He only knew the present tense of time. Seymore might be talking or might be telling him about the future or the presentness of it. Another quote was, "You're a man with ways of knowing that other men do not seem to have." Another quote is, "Time is a fabric to you and there's a clock in your soul." And my favorite quote is, "To Seymore, time is a ribbon that stretches from now to beyond memory in both directions, and each day man unrolls a span of ribbon, and Seymore views the ribbon at various times as the situation requires." So that's kind of his way of describing what Seymore was. Which, if you ever read the book, you have to overlook a lot because it's really hard to see what he's trying to tell you in there. And if you actually take it on face value, it's a very negative, black characterization of Seymore. But he wasn't really saying that, I don't think.